It is Tuesday, October 27th, 2015. I am Doug Neill, and this is Verbal to Visual Video. Today, we're jumping into part 2 of this week's series on designing a curriculum and using visual thinking along the way. In yesterday's video, we set the stage by looking at some higher level planning. Today, we're going to get down into the nitty-gritty details of building out the series of learning activities that you can create for your students. Let's get into it. To plan out those details, we're going to use a technique that I learned from Steven Pressfield called the clothesline method. This method gives you a flexible way of sequencing ideas. In our case, to start, all you really need to know is one, where your students are starting from, which we talked about last time, and also where you want them to end up by the end of this particular learning experience. So everything that happens in between those 2 points is the transformation that you want your students to undergo, something that hopefully you defined after watching part 1 of this series. From there, our task is to get the sequence of units in order, and this is where some of the flexibility of the clothesline method comes into play. You don't necessarily have to get this right the first time. You can get units onto that line as you see fit and move them around as you figure out what sequence of activities and learning experience makes sense to take your students from where they are to where you'd like them to be. Once you have that sequence in order, you can move to step 2, which is where you will flesh out the details of each unit. So now, instead of moving horizontally, you can add some depth to each of those units to plan out what exactly will occur in each of those. Now here's what's really powerful about this method. Unlike working on paper where you might run out of room and have to cram things in when you're trying to get everything on one page, with this clothesline method, you have so much more flexibility with how you move around ideas. Nothing is permanently in place. It's this continual movable board of ideas, which is really exciting and surprisingly fun to use. You don't actually have to use a clothesline though. What I have used in the past is a wall. This here is the planning that I did for the verbal to visual classroom. And I actually did start it with stringing up the 9 modules, the 9 different units within that introductory course on visual note-taking. And from there, I was able to build down each of those units, getting ideas on index card, using painter's tape to get them on the wall, having the freedom to move those ideas around. And throughout that process, kind of above the string, getting some of the other details about the exact mechanics of the course, how I was going to set up the website, some of the tools and technologies surrounding the creation of an online classroom. So in my case, when I was designing that curriculum, I kind of went through a couple of stages. The first stage was just getting as many ideas down as I could, and they didn't always occur in order. I didn't just go through each of the modules and kind of boom, get them all down, because when I would step away from the wall, this is where some of the power comes from, I would have ideas sparked when I was out on a walk or a run or chatting with friends, and I knew that I always had this place, this wall, to go back to and to put the idea that came to me in the right place and see how it fit in with everything else that was there. And it is that particular application of our spatial reasoning skills that makes me so excited about visual note-taking, and why I try to emphasize that visual note-taking is not all about drawing. The use of imagery is really just one component of visual note-taking, and in a lot of ways, the idea of layout and using your spatial reasoning skills, I find that component of visual thinking more exciting and useful than any other. So what I did here after going through that brainstorming process, getting as many ideas down for each unit as I could, you can see kind of in the lower left there that for each of those units, I threw a big 9x12 piece of paper on the wall below it. And that's where I started to take all of those brainstormed ideas and then condense them down again into a summary of that module. So that was a useful step for me as well, to kind of compile each of those units, bring all of those brainstormed ideas together as I started to think about the next phase. That next phase is what we will talk about tomorrow, which is the actual creation, the production of the course materials. So be sure to return tomorrow to see that. And what I am equally excited about is that I get to do that again for a new project of mine that I've mentioned here a few times called Learn in Public. I'm creating a new curriculum around this idea of sharing your ideas, your works in progress, your skill development in public by sharing your stuff online even before you think you are ready. That idea has played a large role in my own development, and I'm excited to work with others around that idea. And I already have the wall to start doing this again. So as I start getting that wall set up, I encourage you to get your own wall space and start filling it with ideas. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think of this idea and if you put it into use, and I will see you tomorrow.